The wind howled across the frozen plains of Glacius 9, rattling the thin walls of the human outpost like a giant's fingers drumming on metal. Captain Elias tightened the straps of his heavy coat and squinted through the icy haze. The scanners had picked up strange energy readings a few kilometers away, and curiosity, the same human trait that had driven his ancestors to explore unknown lands, urged him forward. Elias had spent months on this frozen world, alone except for the occasional transmission from headquarters. Glacius 9 was beautiful in a harsh, cruel way. Endless stretches of blue ice, jagged cliffs that gleamed under the pale sun, and storms that could freeze a man solid in minutes. Most alien explorers had long abandoned it, but humans, Elias knew, had a stubborn streak, and he had plenty of that streak left. He trudged through the thick snow, his boots sinking with every step. Then, the scanners beeped sharply. The readings were erratic but unmistakable. Something living, something small, drifting across the ice. Elias slowed, crouching low, eyes scanning for movement. At first he saw nothing. Then a faint glow shimmered against the snow. A creature, no taller than his knee, lay half buried in the snowdrift. Its skin glimmered faintly, like liquid crystal, and tiny luminescent patterns pulsed along its body. Elias's first instinct was caution, but then he noticed it was shivering violently, its small limbs trembling. "Hey there," Elias said softly, keeping his voice low against the howling wind. He reached out slowly, careful not to scare it. "You're cold, come with me, I'll help." The creature froze but did not retreat. Its eyes, large and strangely intelligent, watched him. There was fear, yes, but also a strange trust. Elias gently scooped it up, wrapping it in his coat. Despite its fragile appearance, it clung to him instinctively, as if it knew he could keep it alive. Back at the outpost, Elias set the creature down near the small heater. He activated the heating lamps, and the alien's luminescent patterns brightened slightly. The warmth made its body pulse rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat in sync with the light. Elias leaned against the table, exhausted, but curious. "You're far from home," he murmured, "and you're lucky I was here." The alien made a soft, almost musical sound, a whisper-like vibration that Elias guessed was its way of communicating. He pulled up a holographic translator, scanning for familiar patterns in its vocalizations. The device blinked. No match found. This species was entirely unknown to human databases. Elias's pulse quickened. Unknown species were dangerous, but also fascinating. That night, after a simple meal of synthesized rations, Elias prepared his bedroll for sleep. He watched the alien as it explored the small room cautiously. Then, without a sound, it slipped under the flap of his bedroll. Elias froze. "You want to stay there?" he asked, unsure whether to be alarmed or amused. The alien pressed close, its tiny body seeking warmth. Softly it whispered in its musical language. Elias could not understand the words, but the tone was clear, pleading, gentle, trusting. His own body heat radiated against the small being, and it relaxed completely, closing its tiny eyes. Humans were adaptable, Elias thought. He had read stories about humans on distant worlds, surviving environments that should have been impossible. And here, in this freezing wasteland, a human's warmth was literally life-saving. Perhaps that was why this fragile alien had sought him out. Sleep came slowly. Elias lay awake, listening to the wind and the soft pulsing of the alien's light. Against his side, he marveled at the trust this tiny creature had shown. He thought about the countless worlds humans had explored, the dangers they had faced, and how somehow instinct, courage, and empathy always guided them to survival. Morning came gray and cold. The wind still roared, but Elias felt an odd sense of companionship. The alien followed him everywhere as he checked the perimeter, studied the energy readings, and mapped the nearby ice ridges. It mimicked his movements clumsily but eagerly, its light patterns shifting as if in silent conversation. At midday, Elias tested the alien's reaction to the warmth of a small thermal generator. The alien hovered near it, almost mesmerized, its patterns brightening and fading rhythmically. It was clear. Warmth was not a comfort, it was survival. And humans, with their internal heat, were uniquely capable of providing it. Elias chuckled. "So that's why you came to me," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "You're not just looking for shelter, you need human warmth." The alien let out a soft trill, almost like a laugh. Elias felt a pang of pride. Humans had always been underestimated by the galaxy, fragile, warm-blooded, emotional. Yet somehow those very traits made them special, capable of survival where others failed. Even here, on the edge of known space, humans had an edge that no technology could replace. By evening, the alien had settled back into his bedroll. Elias watched it for a long time before he allowed himself to close his eyes. The trust, the bond, the unspoken understanding, this was rare. This tiny creature had chosen him, and in a strange way, he had chosen it too. The wind howled outside. Ice, cracking and shifting under unseen pressures, but inside the small outpost there was warmth, light, and a fragile friendship that defied distance, species, and danger. Elias drifted to sleep with a faint smile, the alien curled against his side, whispering soft words in the darkness. He did not understand them yet, but he would. Because humans did not give up, and Elias knew that someday, this fragile alien and he would face the unknown together. And somehow, he knew, humans would shine. The cold on Glacius 9 never stopped. Even after days of survival, the wind still cut through the thickest layers of clothing and the snow continued to drift endlessly across the frozen plains. Yet, inside the small human outpost, warmth and light were no longer the only comforts. The alien, now fully awake and curious, had claimed a place beside Captain Elias that went beyond simple survival. Elias watched it move carefully around the small room, its luminous patterns shifting like waves across a dark ocean. Every movement seemed deliberate, intelligent, as though it were studying him. He had named it Lyra, after the flickering star cluster the alien's patterns reminded him of. Names, he knew, were human things, but it felt right. "Lyra," Elias said, speaking softly. "You need more than warmth. You need food, hydration, protection." Lyra tilted its head and trilled softly, almost in response. Elias sighed, pulling a tray of synthesized nutrient packs from storage. He offered one to the alien. At first, Lyra hesitated. Its delicate limbs trembled slightly as it reached out, carefully tasting the strange substance. Then it pulsed brightly, a small vibration that Elias interpreted as approval. Humans had always been resourceful, he thought, and survival often depended on creativity. Improvisation. It was instinctive. He had grown up with stories of explorers, pioneers, and soldiers who had turned almost nothing into life-saving tools. And now, that instinct applied not just to himself, but to Lyra. Over the next few days, Elias began observing Lyra more closely. Its species lacked internal heat. Without human warmth, or a carefully maintained thermal generator, it would not survive the freezing nights. It relied on him in a way that was both fragile and profound. Yet Elias was amazed at how quickly it adapted. Where most creatures would panic in the cold or the wind, Lyra learned patterns. It understood the safest spots in the outpost, the sounds that signaled storms, and even the small habits of humans that allowed warmth to spread efficiently. By the fourth day, Lyra had started following Elias everywhere he went, not just for survival, but out of curiosity. It mimicked his movements awkwardly at first, then with increasing precision. When he checked the energy readings outside, it hovered beside him, watching, even pointing with its tiny limbs to subtle shifts he might have missed. "You're smart," Elias murmured, his breath misting in the icy air. "More than I thought," Lyra responded with a bright pulse, a glow that seemed to grow and shrink in rhythm with his words. Elias had begun to understand that the patterns were a kind of communication, a language entirely their own. He was patient. Because humans had always been patient when learning new things, especially when survival depended on understanding. Night times remained the most telling. Lyra slipped into Elias's bedroll every night, curling close to him. It no longer shivered with fear. It moved with intention, seeking warmth and comfort. Elias could feel a subtle rhythm in its tiny body, almost like a heartbeat that synchronized with his own. "You're not just surviving, are you?" he whispered one night. "You're learning and trusting." Lyra trilled in response, a soft melodic sound that seemed almost like laughter. Humans were remarkable, Elias thought, because they could inspire trust. They could offer warmth not just to survive, but to connect. It was an instinct built into the species. Even in the coldest, most dangerous corners of the universe, humans had that ability. The following morning, Elias decided it was time to teach Lyra more. He showed it how to operate the small tools he carried: a scanner, a portable energy sensor, even a simple heating lamp. Lyra watched intently, its patterns brightening each time Elias moved a piece. It tried to imitate him, its movements slow but precise. When it succeeded, it pulsed brightly, almost in triumph. Humans had always relied on learning from each other, on passing knowledge between generations. Now, Elias saw that same principle could apply even across species. Lyra was learning, adapting, and begin. The storm had finally passed. The sky above Glacius 9 cleared into a pale, endless sheet of white-blue, and the jagged ice cliffs shimmered like glass towers under the cold sun. Captain Elias tightened the straps of his coat and activated his scanner. The energy readings that had drawn him to this frozen world were still present, only now they were stronger and closer. Lyra, glowing faintly beside him, tilted its head toward the cliffs. Its patterns pulsed in a deliberate rhythm, as if urging him forward. Elias had begun to understand that Lyra's light was not random. It was language, not one he could fully translate yet, but he could feel the meaning. And today, the meaning was clear. "Follow me." Elias trudged through the deep snow, Lyra hovering close by. Each step crunched under his boots, and the air grew colder the closer they came to the cliffs. The scanner beeped louder, signaling a powerful source buried beneath the ice. Elias frowned. The readings were too structured to be natural. "Not just ice," he muttered. "Something built this." Lyra pulsed brightly in agreement. It led him to a narrow crevice at the base of the cliffs. Inside, the walls were smoother, almost carved. Elias brushed his glove against the surface and felt grooves, symbols etched into the ice-like stone. They weren't natural patterns. They were writing. "An ancient civilization," Elias whispered. His breath misted in the cold air. "And this is a doorway." Lyra trilled softly, pressing a small limb against the markings. At once, the grooves glowed faintly, responding to its touch. A hidden mechanism rumbled beneath the ice, and part of the wall shifted aside, revealing a tunnel that descended into darkness. Elias stared in awe. He had seen ruins before, but nothing this intact. The structure was alien, ancient, yet designed with purpose. And somehow Lyra knew how to open it. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Elias asked, his voice echoing softly. Lyra did not answer in words. Instead, it hovered closer to him, its glow dim but steady, like a lantern, guiding the way. Elias followed it inside. The tunnel walls were covered in more symbols, glowing faintly when Lyra passed near them. The air was colder, yet strangely still. Deep inside, they reached a vast chamber. At the center stood a massive crystal-like structure, pulsing with energy. Elias's scanner went wild, displaying readings far beyond anything he had seen. "This is the source," he said, awe in his voice. "The energy that brought me here." Lyra hovered before the crystal, its patterns flickering rapidly. Elias realized that Lyra wasn't just familiar with this place, it was connected to it. The way its glow matched the crystal's pulse was no accident. "Your people built this?" Elias asked. Lyra turned toward him, its patterns dimming into a slow, mournful rhythm. Elias didn't need translation to understand, not my people. Lost people. He stepped closer to the crystal, careful not to touch it. The energy radiating from it was immense but stable. It wasn't just a power source, it was a beacon, a signal to someone or something. Elias tapped his wrist communicator and began recording. Captain Elias, log entry, discovered ancient alien ruins beneath Glacius 9's northern cliffs. Central energy core detected. Unknown origin. Possible beacon or power storage. Accompanied by unidentified alien life form with apparent connection to site. As he recorded, Lyra trilled urgently. Its glow shifted into sharp staccato bursts. Warning. Elias turned, frowning. What is it? Lyra pressed close to him, whispering softly in its melodic tone. Though Elias didn't know the words, the emotion was clear. Danger. Others coming. Elias stiffened. If Lyra sensed danger, then they weren't alone on this frozen world. He powered down his scanner and dimmed his lamp, listening. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly, the sound of machinery echoed through the tunnel. Alien voices, metallic footsteps. Not good, Elias muttered. We need to move. Lyra pulsed in agreement and led him toward a side passage. They ducked into the narrow corridor just as a group of figures entered the chamber. Through a gap in the wall, Elias glimpsed them, tall, armored aliens with glowing visors scanning the crystal. Their language was harsh and clipped, their weapons sleek and advanced. Rival explorers, or scavengers. Either way, dangerous. Elias kept low, holding Lyra close. His heart pounded. These aliens were technologically superior, better armed, and clearly after the same energy source. He whispered softly. They don't know we're here. Stay quiet. Lyra pressed against him, trembling slightly, its glow dimming to near invisible. Elias marveled at how instinctively it trusted him, even in the face of its fear. The aliens studied the crystal for several minutes before leaving through another passage. Their voices echoed long after they were gone, leaving only silence behind. Elias exhaled slowly. That was close, he whispered. Too close. Lyra pulsed faintly, a weak rhythm that sounded almost apologetic. Elias shook his head. Don't. Be sorry, you warned me. You saved us both. They stayed hidden until the sounds of the strangers faded completely. Then Elias stepped back into the main chamber, staring once more at the glowing crystal. He knew now that Glacius 9 was no ordinary, frozen world. It was a graveyard of ancient secrets, and others were hunting them too. He turned to Lyra. We need to learn more. If this energy is a beacon, those scavengers won't stop until they claim it. But maybe we can get there first. Lyra pulsed brightly, the first hopeful rhythm he had seen since entering the ruins. Elias smiled faintly. Looks like we're partners in this now, he said. And trust me, humans don't quit. They left the chamber together, the wind howling, once more outside. The frozen plains of Glacius 9 stretched endlessly before them, but Elias no longer felt alone. He had a companion who trusted him, and a mystery that demanded answers. And somewhere out there, others were coming. But Elias was human, and humans had a way of surviving the impossible. That night, back in the outpost, Lyra slipped into his bedroll again, whispering softly. Elias didn't understand the words, but he didn't need to. He knew the meaning. Stay close. Stay warm. Danger is near. And Elias whispered back, we'll face it together. The silence of Glacius 9 did not last. Captain Elias woke to the faint hum of engines cutting through the icy winds. The rival aliens had found his outpost. He sat up quickly, scanning the frozen horizon through a narrow window. Lights flickered in the distance, search drones sweeping across the snow like predators hunting for prey. Beside him, Lyra trembled, its luminous patterns dimming in fear. Elias placed a hand on the small alien. Stay calm. We'll get through this. He had been hunted before on other missions. Humans, fragile though they seemed, had an edge that no advanced weapon could match: adaptability. Where others relied on raw power, humans survived by thinking differently, by using their surroundings in ways no enemy expected. And here, on a world of ice and storms, Elias knew he had the advantage. He packed quickly: thermal packs, rations, scanners, and signaled Lyra to follow. "We can't stay. They'll burn this place to the ground." As they slipped out through the rear passage, Elias glanced once at the outpost he had called home for months. He felt a pang of loss, but only for a second. A human's true strength was not in structures but in resilience. He could rebuild anywhere. Snow crunched under his boots as he led Lyra across the frozen plains, keeping low to avoid the drones. The wind was fierce, carrying loose flakes that masked their tracks. Behind them, the lights grew brighter. "They're close," Elias muttered. "We need cover." Lyra pulsed softly, pointing its glowing limb toward a jagged ridge of ice. Together they climbed, ducking into a narrow crevice. Inside, the walls sparkled with frozen crystals. Elias crouched low, watching as drones scanned the plains below. The alien pulsed again, patterns sharp and fast. Warning. Elias followed its gaze and saw armored figures moving across the snow, the same aliens they had seen in the ruins, now armed and searching. "Yeah," Elias whispered. "They want the crystal, and they'll kill anyone who stands in their way." He thought quickly. Humans had a way of turning even hostile terrain into allies. The storm above was growing stronger, and Elias knew how to use it. "We're going to move with the wind," he told Lyra. "The storm will hide us." They waited until the first gusts of snow whipped across the ridge. Then, moving swiftly, Elias led Lyra down into the storm's heart. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The snow stung his face, but the wind carried away their tracks. The aliens behind them cursed in their harsh language, their visors struggling against the whiteout. Drones buzzed overhead, but the storm's interference distorted their signals. Elias smiled grimly. Nature itself was fighting on their side. Hours passed as they moved through the storm. Elias guided them toward an old ice canyon he had mapped weeks earlier. The walls were steep and narrow tunnels cut deep into the glacier. A perfect place for a trap. When they reached it, Elias paused. His breath was heavy, his muscles aching, but his mind was sharp. He pulled a small thermal charge from his pack and set it against the canyon wall. The ice was unstable. Just a little heat could trigger a collapse. Lyra watched, its glow uncertain. Elias crouched beside it. "Trust me. Humans have been setting traps since we learned to hunt with sticks. This will work." They moved deeper into the canyon, finding a hidden alcove. From there, Elias watched the entrance. Sure enough, moments later, the rival aliens appeared. Dark silhouettes against the snow, scanning carefully. Elias waited. Patience was another human Leon's advanced, Una. The glaciers groaned under the weight of centuries as Elias and Lyra pushed deeper into the frozen land. The rival aliens were still hunting them, but every day the distance between hunter and prey grew wider. Elias's traps, cunning routes, and use of storms had slowed their pursuit. Still, he knew they would not stop. Lyra pulsed anxiously as they reached a vast ice field where jagged cracks split the ground like scars. At the far end, towering above the plain, was a strange structure, half buried in ice. Sharp pillars rose from the ground, curved like the ribs of some enormous beast. At the center, a dome glowed faintly beneath the frost. Elias's scanner beeped wildly. "This is it," he murmured. "The temple. The heart of the energy source." Lyra trilled in agreement, its glow brightening with excitement. Elias could feel its tiny body vibrating as if it were alive with anticipation. The bond between them had grown stronger. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about trust, about something deeper neither of them could name. They moved carefully across the field, slipping into the temple through a narrow opening in the ice. Inside, the walls were carved with the same glowing symbols Elias had seen before. This time the patterns responded to Lyra's presence immediately. Lights rippled across the chamber, illuminating pathways that had been hidden for centuries. "Your people built this," Elias whispered again. Lyra paused, its patterns dimming, then flickered slowly. Elias understood. "Not my people, but I remember them." They descended into the temple's core, where a massive crystal pulsed like a beating heart. Its glow was stronger than anything Elias had seen, radiating warmth and power. His scanner overloaded, unable to measure the energy. This was no ordinary power source. It was ancient technology, maybe even a beacon that could reach across the stars. Elias approached cautiously. If the scavengers get this, they could control entire systems. No one would stop them. Lyra hovered beside him, its glow steady and serious. Elias realized then that Lyra wasn't just connected to this place, it was a guardian, in some way tied to its purpose. Before he could study further, the sound of footsteps echoed through the chamber. Harsh voices filled the air. The rival aliens had found them. Armored figures entered, weapons raised, light slicing through the gloom. Their leader, taller than the rest, pointed at the crystal and barked an order. The scavengers spread out, their eyes glowing behind helmets. Elias stepped in front of Lyra, heart pounding. He had no advanced weapons, no army, but he had his mind, the terrain, and the trust of the small alien at his side. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The scavengers advanced. One fired, the blast scorching the wall. Elias dove behind a pillar, dragging Lyra with him. He scanned the chamber quickly. The crystal's energy field was unstable. Disturbances could trigger surges. That was his chance. Pulling a small pack of charges from his belt, Elias set them near the crystal's outer ridges. He didn't want to destroy it, only to unleash enough energy to level the playing field. Lyra glowed brightly in warning as the aliens drew closer. Elias gritted his teeth. "Trust me, this will work." The leader stepped forward, shouting, something in its guttural tongue. The scavengers aimed at Elias's hiding spot. With no time left, Elias triggered the charges. The explosion wasn't violent. It was radiant. A surge of energy rippled from the crystal, blinding light flooding the chamber. The scavengers staggered, their weapons shorting out under the pulse. Their visors cracked, systems failing. Elias seized the moment. He grabbed a fallen weapon, rolled from cover, and fired at the supports above. Ice shattered and collapsed, cutting off the aliens' escape. The leader roared in fury, but Elias had already moved, dragging Lyra toward a higher platform. The crystal pulsed again, stronger now. Lyra hovered closer, its patterns syncing with the glow. Elias realized it was stabilizing the surge, guiding the energy so it wouldn't destroy the temple. Without Lyra, they might have been vaporized. "You're the key," Elias whispered. Lyra pulsed brightly in response, almost proud. The scavengers tried to regroup, but Elias used the terrain to his advantage. He darted between pillars, firing, carefully striking weak points in the ice to send shards crashing down. Every move was calculated, instinctive. Humans had always survived by using their environment, and Elias turned the alien temple into a battlefield only he could control. Finally, the leader lunged forward, roaring, weapon raised. Elias ducked under the swing, planted a charge on the ground, and rolled back. The blast cracked the ice floor beneath the leader's feet. With a scream, the massive alien plunged into the depths below, swallowed by the shadows of the temple. The remaining scavengers, disoriented and afraid, retreated. They had underestimated the human, and they had paid the price. Breathing hard, Elias lowered the stolen weapon. His body ached, but his spirit burned. He turned to Lyra, who hovered close, its patterns glowing in relief. "We did it," Elias said. "Together." The crystal pulsed one last time, steady and calm, as if acknowledging their victory. Lyra pressed against Elias's chest, whispering softly. Though he couldn't understand the words, he felt the meaning. "Your warmth saved me. Your courage saved us." Elias placed a hand over it gently. "No," he said. "We saved each other." As they left the temple, the storm outside had cleared. The sky glowed with pale auroras, dancing like ribbons of fire across the horizon. Elias stood for a long moment, staring at the endless stars above. Humans had always been underestimated. Fragile, emotional, reckless. But in the end, it was those very traits that made them strong. On Glacius 9, with nothing but ingenuity, courage, and the warmth of his body and spirit, Elias had turned the tide against impossible odds. Lyra curled against him, whispering once more in its soft, melodic voice. Elias didn't need translation this time. He understood. They were no longer just survivor and guardian. They were partners, and together, they were unstoppable. The cold winds of Glacius 9 had calmed. For the first time since Elias had landed, the sky stretched wide and clear. Auroras shimmered softly across the heavens, painting green and violet ribbons over the horizon. It felt like the planet itself was breathing easier, as though the battle inside the ancient temple had lifted a weight carried for centuries. Elias stood on a ridge overlooking the glacier fields, his gear packed, his ship repaired enough for flight. Beside him floated Lyra, its patterns glowing steady and calm. It no longer trembled with fear or uncertainty. The small alien pulsed with a quiet strength, and Elias felt the same within himself. They had survived. More than that, they had changed. Something. The scavengers had fled, broken and humiliated. Without their leader, their raids on this world would stop. Elias knew they might return one day, but if they did, the story of what had happened here would follow them like a warning. One human and one small alien had defeated them with nothing but courage, cunning, and trust. Elias adjusted his worn jacket. "Well, partner," he said softly, "I guess this is the end of the road." Lyra's glow dimmed slightly, pulsing in a low rhythm, almost like a sigh. Elias smiled faintly. He had grown used to its whispers, the soft hum against his chest, when it pressed close at night, always seeking his warmth. Strange how something so alien could feel so familiar, so necessary. But there was a choice now. Inside the temple before leaving, Elias had discovered something more. The crystal heart wasn't just a power source. It was a beacon, a message left by Lyra's ancient creators. When connected, Lyra had activated part of it. The crystal projected maps of star systems, routes stretching far beyond human charts. It wasn't just a relic. It was a guide, perhaps, even a call to reunite with Lyra's people, wherever they might be. Elias knew he could bring this knowledge back to humanity. A discovery like this would change everything: energy, travel, even diplomacy. But he also knew the danger. In the wrong hands, it could start wars. Lyra hovered near him, as though sensing his thoughts. Its patterns shifted slowly, glowing symbols, spreading like ripples. Elias had grown good at reading them. This time he felt the meaning clearly. "What will you do?" Elias let out a breath, watching the cold mist swirl in the air. "What I always do," he said. "Try to do the right thing, even if it's hard." They traveled back across the frozen plains, heading for Elias's ship. Along the way, Lyra continued to slip against him whenever the wind cut too sharp. Elias didn't complain. The warmth between them wasn't just physical anymore. It was trust, loyalty, and something like friendship. The kind of bond that made survival possible in the cruelest places. At last, they reached the ship. The hull was scarred, patched with ice-melted metal plates, but the engines hummed steady. Elias checked his supplies and powered up the cockpit. As he strapped in, Lyra floated to the console and pulsed brightly, linking with the systems. Strange symbols appeared on the screen. Coordinates, star maps, the very ones from the temple. Elias studied them for a long moment. It wasn't just pointing to other planets. It was pointing home. For Lyra. He looked at the little alien. "So, that's it, huh? Your people are still out there," Lyra whispered, pressing against his shoulder. Its glow was soft but hopeful. Elias felt a lump in his throat. He realized then that Lyra hadn't only been clinging to his warmth out of need. It had been clinging because it was afraid of being alone. Just like him. The engines roared, and the ship lifted from the ice. As they rose, Elias glanced back one last time at the fee.